morning. This is Shirley with Spirit of Matter. And we have Mercury Day, so let's call on Mercury Hermes, the trickster, the eloquent, the informed of trickery and having teachings that are true, um, planet of the sky that can also be joyous spirit, adaptable, and full of humor. It's going to help us with the topic for today. And this is Saturn hour. I know I've had, you're not supposed to like record something on Saturn hour that you want to go viral. But we are talking about the Saturn Neptune here. So let's just have this experiment with this Saturn. As we are talking about Saturn today, the ascendant is ruled by Mars, which is in 15 degrees Cancer. And Mars is trining only Venus. Okay, Venus applies to trine Mars. We're a couple of hours before the eclipse, so some fated information is likely to come in. Mercury is already conjunct in Lilith, and the Sun will soon follow, and then we'll have the eclipse. So, and the Sun is ruling the midheaven. Sun is the 12th house, which is appropriate for Saturn, because Saturn also deals with mental stuff, anxiety, worry, limitation, constraint, and it is its joy is in its 12th house, although right now it's in the 5th. So we have what's upcoming, and I'm not talking about next week upcoming. We have interesting week and interesting month, but what's upcoming is Saturn turning direct in Pisces, and after the Saturn Neptune, okay, the Saturn Neptune deserves its own, and I really recommend you to watch my colleague, okay, Astro Victor, for the Saturn Neptune. He covered the Saturn Neptune in length and in depth, and I don't feel like I have more to say over that, which is good because there's a lot of other videos to do. And the Saturn Neptune is going to happen in Aries, and then it's going to activate the passage of Saturn in Aries. And we are basically finishing up with the sade saties, the moon in Pisces, especially the middle phase and the last phase of Pisces moons, and beginning the sade saties for the moon Aries. Now, it is not exactly accurate because when Saturn conjuncts your moon, okay, you feel it both in the sign before, the sign where the moon at, and the sign after. So the sade saties, the Aries moons have already been feeling that constraint coming and really forcing them to focus on emotional resilience in the face of constriction, both internal and external, rather than, let's say, curate their mood. Now, the interesting thing about sadhusati, if you bring up the sadhusati teachings, and you want to also listen to Ernst Wilhelm around this, he's expert when it comes to these Vedic teachings. So sadhusati and Lada Duncheva, which was his student, and sadhusati is basically when the Saturn, planet of incarnation. Okay, so Saturn is when you make things happen, and they actually incarnate. It's also planet of magic, therefore of witchcraft, both good and not good. And Saturn is also planet of limitation, constriction. And if you think about the part of making things happen, okay, before we talk about the moon, there's another part in that. A part of making things happen, if you think about a person who, let's say, is sick, okay, and let's give it a Saturn ailment, okay, something with the bones, the energy cannot be spent the way it usually can be, okay? So you cannot attend to your home choirs, you cannot attend to your usual routine, And then either you go spiritually deeper in, okay, the usual comforts with food, moon, and other stuff, unfortunately also lunar figure, okay, are not around. Um, and whether because they passed away or because some sort of restriction, okay, if they can't see your needs and stuff like that, or it can be that your lunar figure, your caregiver's going through that transit as well. Um, and so your energy is limited enough so that you only have the things that spark up life in you to spend it on, okay, because you need a spark of life to survive this. um, and you go deeper into what is that initial life spark to begin with, okay, what's that initial life spark, what's that which you've been delaying, which you've been worried about. You're going to be confronting your fears. Okay, if I can give example from my satie, I was editing my mother's book, her second book, which is a satie work. I was writing a screenplay, okay, but I was also facing tremendous crisis, relational crisis, that I could not postpone thinking about what are relationships for me. Perhaps that I've been too complacent with whichever situation, and so not going any direction, and so I've strayed to a place there was a crisis, and I was not going any direction. By the way, now I understand it's to do with satanic ritual abuse, so which is also Saturn. So that is something that I had to tend to. So on the one hand, you incarnate, okay, you actually do the tedious work of incarnating a creation, okay, something you create. On the other hand, the emotional backup, even if you have happy relationships and so on, whatever you have been not tending to because of fear or because of exhaustion or fatigue, you begin to make steps towards, but it's gonna look like there's no emotional support, okay, that which emotionally supported you is not, or even you become aware of you needing to tend to your emotional needs, to the moon stuff, okay. um, so and moon is also lunar for those of us who are in the vicinity of the hermaphrodite called the satanic ritual abuse, which is very more prevalent than you know. So if you're Mason in whichever degree, if you're Illuminati in whichever degree, if the people in your vicinity of family, which I know it's a secret code, so you cannot always know, and so on. So in those situations, sadicity can be even more challenging because the moon is harvested to perpetuate trauma, and it can feel even more impossible to tend to it, okay, because you just know it's not like you can go to therapist. It's not like you have correct teachings at the right time, okay. A lot of it is going to come from within, and the deeper understanding of the role of fertility, the moon. Even if you're child free, for example, you still have to tend to fertility in the sense of the creative spark of life. You might tend to your own birthing, when you were born as baby. How did that affect, okay, the lunar connection or the lack of, how did that affect whatever the moon touches in your chart? If that's to do with the moon cults, perhaps you're not surrounded by the care of Luna because you've been pushing that away. Um, and if you've been in the cults where you have to perpetuate trauma as well, then that can be a big crisis. The promised land of this crisis is that you begin to tend to things. You begin to be aware of importance of the moon. You begin to reconnect with the moon. If moon was only the crazy, lunatic, uncontrollable desires or emotions, or that which drove you crazy. Okay, during my satie, there was a time where I even didn't like having menstrual cycle. Okay, because I saw it's like, oh, this makes me very crazy, this makes me very this. It was actually the lack of awareness of the honoring of the cycle that contributed in creating that. Okay, it's the remnants of perhaps ancestry of these moon cults. Okay, and this is where the challenges that this transit brings are only remedied by really tending to Luna, okay, and 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 tending to Luna and changing the way that we see Luna, okay, because Saturn brings an incarnation of whatever is Moon. Let's say if it's intimate relations, okay, so you would feel in the position of your lunar caregiver, or if it is food, okay, just something's gonna happen around that Saturn. You might grow agriculture with the moon. Those are various things that you can do with that, but you're going to become very aware of whatever deprivation your matrilineage ancestry has been experiencing. Okay, so conjunction is hard aspect. Okay, it's and Saturn is is cold. Saturn is the mountains. What we have in the mountains, lack of oxygen and coolness, but it's also the nervous system. Okay, if you think about the cold places and how even your computer operates better in colder environments, then your brain is overthinking in colder environments, but it's also thinking. Okay, whereas the moon is cool and humid. Um, And so there is if you think about freezing an embryo, or freezing, if you have ovaries and you want to do the process of freezing those, that might be appropriate. You have to work with the women, see other things, and have supportive Uranus aspects to that. So there are all kinds of things that we do when we in satie that we wouldn't do otherwise. Okay, that we wouldn't come to write our biggest thesis or incarnate. And even there are even people who give birth on satie. It's considered challenging because Saturn is delay, and we don't want delay in birthing, right? And constriction, and we want to be able to have expansion, because birthing is expansion of the birth canal and so on. But it's also an incarnating of a baby. So if you've been wanting that, or if it's time for you, then it's not impossible that your birthing will be associated with Saturn. In this case, perhaps you would be interested in the Thermomundi work of Caitlin Kabak, who had given birth during her own satie, and the baby survived. Fortunately, yes, everything is fine. So Saturn is not just negating birth, but it can also be incarnation of children. So Saturn going direct in Pisces. Okay, those of you who have been having the moon in the middle phase of Pisces have it the hardest now, because you're gonna experience Saturn doing the back and forth on your moon, and this is a very challenging time, because yes, Saturn also denotes constriction of that which is moon life. Okay, so your life energy, your vitality, your hopeful emotional optimism, because the moon in Jupiter moon, if it's well aspected, can be very optimistic, very manifesting through the mindset, but underneath the mindset, there's an emotional experience that causes expansion. Okay, you are having access to expansion. Here, this access constricted to somewhat. If you've been, for example, healer, or even psychologist. Okay, one is also deeply psychological, and Pisces is healing, kind of like psychodynamics. This can be denoted. And you've been the type of person who been aware of the emotional experience, the awareness of the need to have access to experience. Okay, perhaps you've been able to generate that with your mind. Okay, but Moon is very manifesting, and Jupiter is mind. So you've been your modalities that you've been tending to so far have been perhaps to generate a certain psychodynamic with the mind or with the dream state. And Saturn can both incarnate that but also limit access to that. And now you have to deal with that, which may yield a teaching that you will be able to provide, okay, for those who don't have this access to manifest relations, okay, because moon Jupiter, moon Pisces is a manifestor of relations, okay. Pisces manifest, moon manifest, moon relations, Pisces optimism and expansion, but also children. um, so whatever Saturn being doing, it, its direct motion is going to seal the deal on, okay. And that means you're done with that and you're continuing on with your life. You might be on the fine edit levels. Do not underestimate that finishing step, okay? Because that which have been missing to seal the deal, and missing is another Pisces term, is going to show up. And do not expect that because it's the last, it's like you've been there for a while, oh, now it's easier. Yes, but with Neptune, it's surprising, it's miraculous, it's something you didn't expect. There could be both miraculous cure, but it's something you didn't expect, because Saturn would tend to the root of the issue. So in Pisces, there's a little bit of fog, but Saturn would tend to the root of the issue. And those of you that have Saturn in the middle phase of Pisces have been tended on a superficial level. Saturn now, somebody is going to bring up something's going to pop up that seals the deal. It can be remedifying, healing, but it's also you're receiving this healing because you're tending to what you haven't been tending to, but it's also your karma, in the sense that now you have to tend to that. Okay, think about with Saturn is also climbing up the ladder. Think about certification. Okay, I recently met a woman that wanted to be child psychologist because her child psychologist was very supportive of her, and she's actually going through doing that. And our meeting, our encounter, are basically because I'm so informed in the issues of child kidnapping and satanic rituals and all these things. So the meeting with me was very karmic for her because I gave her a ton of information, and I said it's not to make you not want to do this, but so you understand what you're tending to. If you understand what you're tending to, you'll be able to seal the deal and get solutions. So that is obviously something of that karmic encounter is to do with healing, and even in this case child healing, that can seal the deal. It's like now that you know that seals the deal of what your next step is going to be. And now she can be, for example, getting that funding or getting that certification, or okay, the missing link is popping up in that sense. So that's what we're going to be having with the Saturn direct. All the things that came up during the Saturn retrograde are going to come again. And remember, this is the last big planet we have in Pisces before 2044, when we're going to have Pluto in Pisces. So think about all the electricity in our oceans, not just the pollution, the electricity in our oceans, okay? And we have big companies that like ASML and chip companies that really that can turn to dust, and we have internet because of that, but it's also another force of surveillance, another technology of surveillance that Pluto is definitely going to uncover. And on the other hand, think about all the cold cases, the missing people, the fact that we have the technology and the surveillance uh, to know exactly where these missing people are, but we still have true crime shows. Why? Okay, and that's another thing. That Saturn sealed the deal for Saturn. It creates the infrastructure to expose what Pluto would bring. Okay, think about Saturn, um, the Saturn in Capricorn that before Pluto, or the Saturn in Aquarius before Pluto is now in Aquarius. Okay, what was Saturn in Aquarius doing? It was doing this country's North Korea everywhere because of the lockdowns, the division of societies, the keeping people in their own houses. But it's also the house, the sign of architecture. A talisman of Saturn in Aquarius in its home sign is used to create architecture, which is basically being captivated by Masonic, which basically means that the architects, okay, the Masonics were the architects that were conquered by whether it's Khazarian or Vatican, and it is by creating this architectural structure that they were provided with kind of like a guild where you could be an architect. So think about the first guild of architects as the Masonic tribes, and the implication on our housing, okay? And think about, people, leaders like Adolf Hitler, wanting to be artists, but but also had inclination for architecture as well. Think about the discussion we have right now about, oh, we want to go back to the past. Look at how the architecture was versus this plain architecture and so on. So Saturn Aquarius is going to dredge those things up. Architecture structures were used as occult structures. You think about the pyramid. Pyramids is a very classic example, but it's not just in Egypt. And the pyramid structure is so essential to both Rosicrucian and Satanic and Masonic, and in Capricorn. But you also think about making it a global structure, okay, a more decentralized set of pyramids. If you think about decentralized structures, the Rabobank in Netherlands is a cooperative, okay, as a form of decentralized structures that unfortunately still entails satanic ritual abuse. So there is the issue of centralization, but also within decentralized there is a hidden one world thingy that we're gonna need to address in the next coming 2 years, where people are going to abolish all cults, which just means the abolishing of humanity, rather than addressing the internal architecture of for this work, and would save a lot of people and provide them the right to exit violence. Okay, so Saturn in Aquarius was the architect, and for me, for example, I was living in a student apartment. I'm half Israeli, half Dutch, and I said to myself, well, I wouldn't get more in Netherlands, and this ancestral, even though I didn't live, I wasn't housing Netherlands, and I just accepted it. I said, it's a small country, they don't have a lot of housing. If I want to stay in Netherlands until I get my public housing, that would entail human trafficking. So either to be trafficker or to be trafficked, because of the corruption in housing market, which is genuinely, they have not many houses, okay? So this is not like United States, which is designed, but there's genuine issue with small land, okay, small housing, and we could perhaps say Israel is the same, but it's not true, because the role of willing consent could definitely regulate population of Middle East, but and as well in Netherlands, as well in Europe. But yes, Europe is indeed more populated. You cannot ignore that. So, I'm not talking about refugees. I'm talking about people that come from the ancestry, so maybe married and so on and so forth. And the part of this hermaphrodite called this diminishing sperm count, okay, which necessitates biodiversity, okay. So when it's will and consent, you would say it's no problem, but it's not, okay. So that is why we had colonialism, that we don't know. Um, it's not that population just grows, it's just it, it is those things of controlling population, and Pluto is going to dredge up these things. So if you're and I want to bring in Voltaire, because late Voltaire understood his mistake about the Jews. He said the Jews are not more or less evil than entire humanity. And if we remember late Voltaire, because Voltaire was also a Mason and made this mistake, okay? Um, at the time where the division was between Judaists and Christians, and now where the division is more going towards Islam versus Christianity. So if we will all, whether within or outside these cults, take the wisdom of Voltaire and remember that the Muslims or the Christians or the Jews or the Inuit are not more or less evil than entire humanity, we are a step forward towards addressing what the practice that, and to abolish the practice rather than to abolish the people. How soon we'll get this enlightenment will dictate how much of humanity is abolished, okay, and what the results. So yes, Saturn in Aquarius before Pluto was building in the infrastructure to pay attention to architecture, okay, to the design of architecture, the architecture of our society through actual construct, okay, whether it's the housing, the shelter, the jails, the institutions, the geometry, even sacred geometry, the religion, and so on. And Pluto now is going to come about and completely transform this. Now Saturn is in Pisces, so we think about the medical structures, we think about healing, we think about our oceans and the digitalization of our ocean waters, okay? And we want to pay attention, because when Pluto comes in, people will say this is natural. Okay, think about the Romantic era, where people looked into the ocean and saw all of their dredged horrors in it and began to be fascinated, because it's a form of alchemy. But once this is a form of alchemy, it's true, but they began to believe that this is their nature projected here onto the ocean, which is not at all. There were designs upon designs upon designs upon designs before we looked into the clarity of the waters and said, oh, the water is a mirror, it shows me myself. But no, there was design thrown into that. So once you look into the water is so polluted that you believe that this is yourself. Might be useful for Saturn, for sade Pisces moons. Okay? It's the grace of Pisces. Okay, you know you're not that ugly within. There was tremendous amount of energy invested to torture, to rape you as an infant, or your mother, that so you will call it the nature of humanity. But it was by design in a pyramidical structure, whereas if the design could have been different, you would absolutely not be seeing that in the ocean. Okay, Pluto will be the trash in our ocean, but Saturn is the skeleton in the closet. It's skeletons in our oceans. So, and this is perhaps why Sadisati with the water moon, with Pisces moon, um, is more, let's say, of little potential, okay? Because you look into that water and you think that that's yourself, and you cannot separate yourself from that water, and that's more challenging to deal with, where in fact these are structural designs of humanity. They seem gigantic, but there's points of interference which for Pisces have less access to because they tend to blend. So you blend with death, and that can be very manifesting. Um, Alternatively, and so Saturn can also restrict access to psychedelics, to near-death experiences, to channeling, so we can understand the genuine lethal potential around this, um, and just pay respect. Okay, just pay respect to this. Good intention to set was access to life, access to, and the word access is important here because Pisces is the great Jupiterian, and here we need a Pisces requires access to itself, okay, access to optimism. Um, but there are other things that can happen with that, and so this is a challenging, okay, for transit because Saturn also rules refugees, so it's both holding the space that yes, the people who locked the crazy up and mistreated them and excluded them ended up in an open air prison for 75 years, Gaza. And the fact that we don't want to perpetuate that, because now that would mean that we allow this and we treat people like this, but we also don't want to enable the locking up of the people that are going through basically sexual abuse. That's what made them so crazy. Okay, they were raped. So it's holding the two hand in hand and understanding that perpetuating this abuse is not good. But also when we give right to exit, we have to change the way we treat the people who we think are crazy, um, as well as the people who we think are monsters. Okay. The vice of Zeus, Jupiter, that rules the Saturn, is incest. So pedophilia as well. There is cure. Okay, and the cure does not go through dishonoring the lunar. Okay, but it's also important to remember that once child been abused, they can, unless you honor the lunar, they will bifurcate to either harm themselves or others or both. Okay, especially when you add in the electrocution, the multiple personalities that are created with this government Saturn, debt, enslavement Saturn, cults, okay, satanic cults. So very easy to say off with their heads, but what about the children? Okay, it's just you're just rejuvenating the stash of people perpetuating that, while the people who know something about something, catch them as adults, you're killing them. Okay, you're killing those who can help you have the inside information that have been through that. Grow with love. So the satie Pisces gonna come to culmination. Saturn's going to conjunct Neptune in Aries, and we get to the satie Aries. The lunar construct, okay, the lunar construct of Pisces is the cosmic water before creation. The lunar construct of Aries is the and I have, for this solar return that I had moon in Aries, moon Ra in Aries in the 6th house. So I've increased awareness of kind of like the layer of feel of a moon Aries. I've been drawing a lot of moon Aries into my life, a lot of increased awareness of the moon Aries people. Aries is very much the head of the baby. Okay, it's very aware of its emotional needs, actually, and there is a emotional need in action, taking action. Okay, the Aries moon can come out of trauma. If I think about the survivors of the death cults that I know, probably there's a lot of them are moon Aries, not all of them, but and it means that the fire of this moon is initiative fire. A person takes action regarding, okay, of what enslaved them, okay, in as much as they're allowed to within the cult, and this tremendous renewal, emotional renewal that happens with Aries, that the trauma doesn't stick, okay? Conflict doesn't stick emotionally, and then a person doesn't carry that timestamp of that conflict, and that can create emotion also within and around them in regards to this trauma, okay? So that being said, it's very impulsive, okay? It takes action. So for example, children that more likely to in childhood without access to perpetuate for youth is for to take action regarding what was done to you. And when you don't have access to action, you try things. One of the things you try would be for to take action, for to do that, to be the active perpetrator, and that can also happen unless they have access to be active about the topic and innovate something new, which they might be more open to than you think, because Aries is sometimes even glad to change the course of action. It's a cardinal sign. It wants to start something, um, and this is the sign where taking action is assisting in emotional safety. Think about taking action about your lunar traumas is actually creating the rejuvenation and emotional safety. This is why it's such a courageous sign. Okay, this is the sign for, you see, if I think about what I tend to this year is the layer of moon Aries in the 6th house is coming on to my, Cancerian emo moon. And that's the topic of expandable children. If you see me on YouTube, you don't see me, whether it was on X or Twitter or on the channels of Where It Matters. Maybe some of you do, but I don't just limit it to speaking, okay? I do stuff. I do stunts, okay? And so when I think about it and the power of taking action to change that, where a water moon doesn't always have the access to it, it's not an actioning moon, then it has a lot of power of curating, and you will see people in really weird situations, like, how come you're talking about this? How come you're doing that? Did you, like, what the fuck? What the fuck did you just do? Okay? But that's the moon Aries. This is the courageousness of the moon Aries that breaks through for the limitations and moves the energy around. So it's a very Mars action oriented. But if somebody's not Aries moon, you might not be able to facilitate it. So the Pisces moon might not be able to do that. Okay, you don't have access. Now, sade, satie, Saturn, this is where we get to the bad news, can create two forms, okay? One of which, and you already begin to feel that because the Saturn is in Pisces, okay? one of which is the ability to take action is limited. Okay? Your ability to enforce your emotional sovereignty is limited. And that can be because of conflict, or that the potential to create conflict is limited. Okay, it can also be because of peace, because Saturn is restricting conflict. Okay, so you think about the peace as a limitation, or the limitation of peace as constructive to the art of war. Yes, I have limited energy, I have to pick my battles. Okay, so people usually, when they say, pick your battles, they mean, yes, stay silent, attend to your daily life, okay, but pick your battles. For the moon Aries, it's like, okay, what is the one thing that would change everything? I'm going to put all my energy there. Oh, expandable children satanic ritual abuse, because that's been on for 9 millennia. It's all of our leaders. That would really change the world if we move the energy around the distance to show how it's related to every single step in our lives. Okay, so let's pick that battle. Again, everyone went, what the fuck? Okay? What the fuck are you doing? Well, I'm tending to the thing that will change everything, so it's worth spending my energy on. If I have limited energy, then I'm tending to that. That is very much an Aries type of thinking. It's very innovative. It's very courageous. That's why we see Aries a lot in the intelligence. A lot of them are recruited. It's not necessarily say, I want to be here, I want to be there. A lot of them are recruited because they have that courageous. Okay, but they would also create the changes in the intelligence. Because the Aries would know about it, that, hey, well, weren't the Israelis the one that found a way to interrogate a person without torture? Yeah, so why is there torture? This doesn't serve any national security, global security, any security. Okay? Aries is the one that, if you think about the Me Too, where we had Uranus and Aries squaring Pluto, then some of the people, like myself, took it to, okay, how can I innovate here? Okay, well, that's the sex that I don't want. Let's talk about what is the sex that I do want. And then, okay, I actually made profit out of this because there was a place that would sell sex-positive sex workshops to, self-pleasure and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, that's lovely. Let's do that. And I have to, let's work in that. Because I was hard at work, and that kind of like, oh, that would be the antidote. Yeah, but then there were the cultural that added another layer of intricacy. But I made good achievements. Okay, then if you get a person that for those workshops not suffice, and then they talk with me, and they do stuff that causes the welfare to work in their favor, and that's just self-pleasure. Okay, releasing energy and working, stretching a little more, tending to the trauma, because the trauma is bigger. Okay, if you were fearing for your life, and were raped and so on, is bigger than someone that had, let's say, a religious shame that was not raped, and then the inner stuff that they deal with when they come to orgasm. The purging is different. So you want to be way more containing to yourself. But the basis is just the same basis, just that the expectation can be different, and you might think that something's not working, if it does. So that is the innovative power of Aries. To say, okay, somebody lives like, you got assaulted, you got this, you got that, and you think, and the Aries mind, because why on earth would they do that? Like, that's so stupid. Where's this stupidity coming from? Perhaps there's something that we can innovate here, and hey, but if we tended to that, and you see how you're not going here, you pave the path, the road less taken, okay? Or the road not taken. You take the road not taken, then that change all the course of your life. Saturn might both incarnate such situations in your life, the road not taken, or because your natural inclination is to take the road not taken, it might create certain constriction where the ability to do that is constricted for a while. So you can think about the other polarity, which is Libra, and Libra is about, the image or balancing things, or and so on and so forth. Um, or you can think about the ableism factor. Okay, now Chiron has been doing Saturn's work for a while in Aries, so increased awareness of the limitation of our ability. Okay, because Mars sign ability, and dealing with when people would talk about ableism. Okay, what do they mean? Because Aries is towards sovereignty, it's the head of the baby, it's the impulsive action. And there's a lot of things that Aries does that it just does. Okay? You would catch Aries people, it's not for nothing that some of the leading figures in our world, and right now in general, global, are Aries moons. Because they take the worst of 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 trauma, and they will innovate. You have to be careful, because they can innovate on perpetuating traumas. Innovation is innovation, yes, but they will innovate in a way that they take action, and that this taken action diminishes a sense of powerlessness in the face of the situation, and even in the face where everybody tries to put them in powerless situations. They would have innovative ways. The challenge is the ableism, okay, the ability to do so. Aries does not pay emphasis so much on helplessness. Saturn, satie, can put the helplessness factor into the Aries moon, which indeed is another crisis that Aries will innovate around. Okay, it's not stirrable as Pisces, but anything that requires surrender is something that the Aries archetype doesn't quite get. Okay, they get action, but they don't get the intuition of letting go, unless they have other planets that denote that here, like a Pisces telling or something. The tending to and letting go is something that impulsive Aries and action-oriented Aries might be forced into. So we will have even innovations where at other times the Saturn would not satisfy, the moon Aries could not do. In this time they can, simply because, I don't know, they Mars oriented is accidents. Okay, they had an accident and then they're constrained in some way, and now they have to innovate around that. And usually they would not have the energy to sit it through. Now, because they're so tired and exhausted from the accident, their energy is limited, but it creates this type of creation, this type of incarnation that they cannot do otherwise. You're going to be limited by the structure as well, limited by depth in a way, and they will innovate. Okay, Aries is the type of person telling, okay, you don't have the money to pay the rent. They'll find an empty lot of land and they'll start building. Okay? And then they tell you, you're gonna be taxation, you're gonna be that, you have this fine and that fine. Say, fuck it, I'm homeless. And that can innovate to something that will later change the way of taxation. And perhaps that's a part of how Israel changed its taxation, such that you cannot limit the checks of people who are in debt because of a business that they tried to do and did not work out. Okay, you cannot forbid them from renting an apartment. With what money, I don't know, but but that's a question. Okay, that's a thing. It's definitely a loophole that leads to housing first. Okay. But Aries, it's not for nothing that Aries archetype is so associated with the faculties of thought that were the basis of the creation of in America. You think about the pragmatism, think about the innovativeness, and you think about the sovereignty and the emphasis on it. America basically has all the thought faculty and philosophy foundation to dismantle anything that tries to hold on. Okay, but where there's taxation, you have the Constitution. Somebody comes to collect, so get off my land. Okay, get off my land. It doesn't matter if it's an all government official or whatnot. Okay, you're allowed to shoot them. You say, oh, I'm not allowed to shoot them in this weapon and that weapon. Well, that's the Constitution. That, oh, it doesn't pertain to this, it doesn't pertain to that, we'll talk over your dead head. Okay? The limitation can be the might is right. Both with Aries and with Aries in general, because this is a Mars sign where you enforce things, you set boundaries by cunning intuition or by the act of war. Aries is not afraid of war, okay? And so the Aries placement and the moon Aries is psychologically fearless or courageous when it comes to a psychological battle, okay? So it's not afraid of being unsafe. It's because safety is something that's created, okay? Saturn can perhaps create a situation like Chiron where, oh, suddenly there is fear. Suddenly there is fear coming to the heart of the moon Aries, or that the energy is limited, and so that which you didn't think is a battle, now you battle it, and like an area, and you innovate around it, and that innovation helps others as well, because it's the head of the baby. But you never tended to this small of a battle, okay? Because for you survived through this small of a battle. Most people died, and you never tended to this small of a battle. So now you have to tend to it again. So you innovate around it, and now it's more visible. Your karma is that that small battle that you didn't think you would need to fight, you have to fight, and of course you innovate through that, and that actually is foundation to kind of like your bigger battles, okay, your bigger entrepreneurship, your bigger frontiers, and so on. On the other hand, Saturn can extend your frontiers, okay, make your battle durable, okay, make your emotional battle durable, psychological battle durable. And Saturn is also denoting time, so something lunar that is associated with the passage of time, so something that's enduring battle, because Aries is more cardinal, okay, it is when you turn the engine on, that's Aries, okay, it's that fire. It's like, you turn the engine on, okay, I don't have to, just let it go, because I turn it on, this is somebody's going to drive it, okay? But now with Saturn in Aries, it's like, you're the guy that's going to drive this car. It's like, well, I generate engines. Well, you generate engines, now you have to drive the car that you generated the engine for. And you see both the things of like, what are the limitation of your innovation, but also the duration, okay, for what this thing that I created, that I started, what it does. What's the duration of that? And that's going to be at the time where the new Saturn structures go viral, so it can be viral sovereignty structures or viral dissolution of sovereignty, because both Neptune has this duality around it, and it's going to be co-present with Neptune. So your sade satie is going to be co-present with Neptune in Aries, and while Neptune will take some years to go over your moon, it's a different thing. So you are going to learn a lot about surrender, and how to work with Neptune. Okay, so if you're after the Neptune square in your life, you are more prepared for this work, because Neptune requires you the tender touch of set intention, let go, surrender. It's the message in a bottle that pops up at the end of Neptune transit in a sign, or Neptune cycle in a sign. Just letting go into surrender, okay? The adaptability that's done with taking action is antithetical to Neptune, but it's not something that cannot blend with the nature of Neptune, okay? It's something that you can definitely take action, let it go, take action, surrender. Set intention to take action, surrender, okay? Those things that can actually eventually increase your durability and increase your potency, okay? But it's not going to look like that in the beginning, okay? But you have to deal with the times where you cannot take action, and it looks like you're inactive, okay? That active sleep that you don't sense, and the processes that happen within it that are not active meditation. Okay, it just looks like nothing happens, but in the background, deep things happen. And some of you that have Neptune in Scorpio might be more adaptable. Okay, again, you pass your Neptune square, so you're more adaptable. But the newer Neptunes, okay, the Sag Neptune, the Capricorn Neptune, the Aquarius Neptunes, you're going to be feeling the first timestamp of a Mars-oriented Neptune. Okay, so if you haven't had that in a synastry or with a parent, most of you had, it's going to be very, very weird because Mars is oriented physical action towards something or an act of speech, kind of like intelligence. And Neptune is intelligence, but it's the intelligence of the water rather than the spark of light. You will have extra vivid dreams if Aries is your 12th house. Why am I saying extra vivid? Because this combination of fire and the primordial water. Okay, so the dream might be incredibly vivid. You might feel the temperature of the fire in your dream. Your magic can become more potent, but it's gonna feel impotent. At first, it's gonna feel impotent before you're going to see the full potency of what you believed was, okay, impotency. And the missing link is attunement. Okay, for everything got time for attunement, but Saturn can restrict it in a way where it grows attuned. At first, it grows frustrated and impatient. Then you grow so frustrated and impatient, you just surrender. You say "fuck it," and in that "fuck it," something happens that alchemizes. Okay, for your whole emotional, internal, psychological experience. So the Sadecities, Aries, have already begun to feel it when Saturn ingressed into Pisces. And even the things that are associated with taking on more responsibility, loss of a parent, unfortunately, a lunar figure, have already been, beginning to take place. And then there is the perfected 3 years where the conjunction happens. Now, let's talk about the moon Libras, because the moon Libras are not just experiencing the Ketu going through their moons, or the eclipse with Ketu on their moons, but they are basically experiencing this, about to experience the Saturn opposition. Okay, just like the moon Virgos have been going through the Saturn opposition, and later the moon Scorpio as well. The Sadecity of Aries is the Saturn opposition to moon Libras, which is profound. Okay, it is profound. It is, I would say, no less difficult necessarily than the Sadecity. It's not being talked about, but it is profound. And basically what happened to me during my Saturn opposition moon was that the psychologist that I went to curate a sexual trauma from childhood was perpetrators worked so hard to bring me the child, and then something happened to him. Okay, it was MK Ultra. So that means that he was tortured, raped, and electrocuted, and so on. And I saw that the changes in the electricity in the brain, because you sit in one room with the person, you see them for more. It's a more intimate encounters, and I saw for these changes of, and I now understand it's the electrocution. Okay, so apparently I became his witness, but he threatened my life. So with all those tortures and stuff like that, that are horrid, okay, prior to 7th October, and with all the MK Ultra South. So yeah. And that was basically, you go to psychodynamic psychotherapists to curate childhood wounds. That's what's happened. Okay. Okay. So And then the guy that takes your outgoing your welfare money that you pay for the little that you can pay until you found a therapy that asks you, why don't you work when you're working? Teaching English or making more money than people that work in an actual job, because I learned English and practiced a skill that helped me to generate income with less hours, that was adaptable to recovering from CPTSD. And then the person asks you, why don't you work? Like, you dumb fuck. You're getting my money. Okay? You're literally receiving my income. Okay? But why don't you work? Yes, but I didn't. It was more polite than that. And I was like, what the fuck is happening? I said, you know what? When I hold a rose quartz crystal from Madagascar, there's my moon line, then this criticism that I feel, or even self-criticism, that seems to go away. And then I make another couple of thousand posts on Instagram that kind of advance my business, that I'm building with the business that I would be happy to be an employee in, because anyway I'll be employee in my business. Okay, and that shut them up, I thought. But this is something that MK Ultra does not like to hear. Okay, Arbeite macht nicht frei. So you Libra moons are kind of experiencing, and I dare say, similar situation. We are in MK Ultra times. This is the time where they try to fool all the people all the time. And so my experience could even be humble regarding what you experience. Okay. I have colleagues Moon Libra that I know MK Ultra is up to them. I know. Even if they're eclipse children, I know MK Ultra is up to them. Okay? And they're being seen as white supremacy. They're not even white. Maybe they're white in America. They're not even white, but they're being called white supremacy while they're dealing with that. No, it's not just Ketu Libra. It's also Saturn beginning to perfect its opposition to the moon, which is under discussed. It's not sade, but hey, it's also it's not less significant than sade, and it creates a certain type of, if I take my case, which is one extreme case where I went to psychodynamic psychotherapist to create my relational wounds, and I had to heal in spite of him. Okay. And it's not me blaming him. The guy's tortured. What can I do? That's the structure. Again, then yes, that's the guy that picks of which children you take from the welfare and so on. If it's not for one brave mother that sued him, I wouldn't even know that. So think about child scandals. I'm bringing child scandals karma. Well, my parents, they didn't turn to the welfare because they didn't want to have me kidnapped when they divorced. So I guess I bring a lot of karma to the welfare around children. So that is Moon Aries grabbing, facing, this is beyond facepalm, Baden facepalm. I used to say Baden all the time because of Nasrallah. Now Nasrallah is supposedly dead. So, rest in peace, Baden. Nobody gets that now when I say that. It's kind of like, what are you, Queen Elizabeth? It's done. We can't say it anymore. Anyway, the linguistic mourning. So Moon Libras are having a hard time. And with the Moon Libra, it's a different story, because the Moon Aries is a sovereignty story. The Moon Libra is a balancing story. So that which you use to balance your life is no longer. For example, if it was, hey, my life is shit, but at least I have a shit ton of money, that coping mechanism is restricted. Or, hey, my life is shit, but at least I'm not in debt. I used to think that before 2008. I held only cash. I did not hold credit card. And then 2008, I got into debt. I got studies. That's the thing that got stuck, because I didn't want to take a loan to study. I was like, I'm not going to have any way to pay that. And ended up writing checks that had no cover. Okay? that would have no cover, because the bank chose not to respect them, even though I was working. Okay, so I saw very literally that Arbeit macht nicht frei. All I did for working several jobs, and the best jobs you could get without degree, because I had this. I have a face of a CEO. Okay, so I tend to impress people. And my name Jungblut, so maybe they think I'm reptilian or something. I don't know. Maybe they think they have to hire me. I don't know. But they get all excited, and I would get the best jobs, with the most high-paying jobs, and that wouldn't be able to support just me and the parent apartment in the suburbs where none of us is extra spending. And mind you, having a pasta in a almost workers restaurant, kind of like this, not too fancy, after work, and coffee is like, that's the most, like, some I didn't smoke, I didn't take drugs, even though I'm half Dutch. If I didn't drink, like, I had no expenses. And like, if work doesn't work, then we need to tend to it in another way. That was 2008 for me. I tried to turn to this shitty welfare thing, and I said, well, listen, I want to live, but I just don't seem to manage household. I thought I want to kill myself. And they said, we'll take you to hospital. And I say, fuck it, take me to hospital. Well, that's for money for studies, because I knew that you can get for studies. They say, you're pretending. I say, well, apparently I'm very cuckoo if I can't do very much, but I like to study. And they gave me, and then I saw for the cricket. I say, well, if I'm already here, let's try for what you have. And there was the pyramidal or extra pyramidal, and I was like, oh, that doesn't seem to work it for me. No, it's not because of the pill. Okay, let's try another not pill. I don't know. So you have to try trial and error. And I say, it's not that. Like, how do people? What the fuck is going on? Then you hear the stories, and you understand what is going on. You're like, oh damn. I knew that the townsfolk is kind of like the sacred clown, that they have knowledge or hidden knowledge or something like that. But I also did not have like ideation for the crazy folks, like with people. And then I was like, oh God, that's actually real. That's actually real. Like, people would tell me stuff, and it's just like, if I do engage with what they call psychotic content, they heal. So I'm not a doctor. I'm just a human being that listens to them without thinking that they're just imagining. That's all it takes. That and housing first. Really? That's all it takes. Like, that's schizophrenia. So that would be something that I would grapple with. For Libra, the way in which you balance things now is changing. Okay, so and by the way, 2008 had to do with my 8th house Libra. I think it was Ketu, I don't know, or Rahu. I really don't know. Okay, but it was something around that axis, because then I would receive basically money from the welfare that would allow me to study. Whereas it all began, but I didn't want to take a loan because I was like, I will not be able to pay it. Eventually, I was forgiven for the debt because the laws changed. Laws, Libra, okay? So again, you might be dealing with some sort of similar situation, okay? And it can be because you wanted to take responsibility, you're still taking responsibility, or being Saturnian in one way, and what works is actually another. There's a crisis of the way you balance something in your life, depending where Libra is. And this is a very emotional thing, okay? Saturn, Aries, okay? The type of battles you fight. Maybe for you, picking your battles was picking smaller battles, and you need to pick bigger battles. Maybe you've been picking the bigger battles. Because if you're Libra, you could go outside of the Libra to balance things. That would be the Aries. You've been picking the bigger battles, but actually it's just what you thought was a smaller battle, it's a bigger battle. Okay? And how you balance your emotions. Okay, can actually be a medical issue as well. how you balance your food diet. Also, these things. And Saturn is criticizing of what you do. So you could be doing something right, but then there is some Aries persona or Saturn persona from the Aries type that tries to criticize or to limit you. Or, for example, it can be a situation where you begin to have the right diet, the right food, the right exercise, the right that, but there's a world war. Okay, so now you don't have this. Actually, before I went homeless, I studied like aromatherapy and stuff like that. So you try to eat the best food and try to this and try to that with the minimal resources that you have, and you see you don't get to live because it's not enough. Okay, but you think, okay, I will make the money from my business, and then I'll have to model it correctly and so on. And then I was homeless, and then I was like eating whatever food there was. Okay, and mind you, the winter shelters in Netherlands had great food. And you understand that if I went homeless in Israel, that the winter shelters in Netherlands had great food, is because the state of Israel has no solutions for people who are homeless. They tell us to go to Europe. You're barking on the wrong tree. Soon we're going to have all these people recruited into NATO coming to the Middle East. Guys, we can't feed you because the government doesn't allow, but if you want to have a settlement together, maybe we could build something sustainable. But that's true, okay? Look at how Ketu on Libra in Israel has what? Spica ascendant. If you're Libra moon, then you might get caught in the situation. You're actually doing the right things to balance yourself, but there's so this restriction that's coming too. And it's true, as holistic health practitioner, it was important for me to face once again, as I did in 2008, to face once again. And now there was no studies, there was not the carrot of, oh, let's go to academia. The carrot was missing. Okay, there's no studies. So I faced it once again. If you don't take these pills or those pills, no housing, even in Netherlands, unless you're a refugee, and then you fill in the form that because you would be deported, and then they will recruit everyone as a war and that was, you get housing for a little bit. I even had people that were coming from other countries, even European countries, 2-3 years later, contacting me saying, "How you are? You house me?" Because I'm whistleblower, I cannot tell that much. So just checking up on me and the situation. Plus, I went in this situation. You try to show for you. Okay, I have Dutch passport, and I could not speak Dutch without sounding German. So I was really afraid to try. I spent my money to study Dutch. Actually, in 2008, before the crisis, as I said, I know English, I know German, and it's good for me to know my fatherland's language. So I spent 2 semesters studying the language, but I forgot. And I couldn't spell. We sounded German. Israel said, but we try, because I grew up in Israel, we try to speak Dutch, we sound German. So I didn't want to embarrass myself. But other ways, I tried to show, okay, this is my passport and this, and I can work, and I have this diploma and that diploma and so on. And then she said, so go to the immigration. I think that she's joking with me, but no, she was trying to help. Because if I went with the Israeli passport, then with Israeli I don't know, but other passport would be okay. Okay? And you cannot file asylum because you're coming from Israel, right? But there's no solution for Israelis who are homeless. All it takes is that you escape violence and you need a place to stay. And people can help you only so much. Okay, very kind people, but it's only so much. There's another person living in your place. They're trying to sort for what caused them to be in this situation. Okay, so that means they compromised on something they can't compromise. In Libra, you might be in such situation, not necessarily with housing, but you understand, I cannot compromise anymore. And there is criticism of your saying, well, I'm worthy. I don't need to compromise this. I don't need to compromise that. Okay? I'm worthy just as much as any person. And then there can be criticism coming from the Saturn figure that's opposing the very process that you're doing emotionally to caretake, to self-care, or to caretake for yourself. So do not underestimate the Saturn opposition as well. Um, it is profound, it is deep, it is challenging, overwhelmingly no less than, if less than the satie, then a tiny bit less than the satie. Okay? In general, oppositions with malefic don't sleep on that. Okay, that's a serious business that you're dealing with. Okay, I had my second house planet opposing a ninth house Pluto, and that means that whenever I try to eat, I will have no life or ability to travel unless I learn to balance it somehow, or whenever I want to travel or to study, I give up food completely. Okay, I was addicted to coffee because I had no money to buy food during university. And mind you, I'm not the person that doesn't care about good nutrition or not aware of how important it is. And a part of it is like, hey, the world is fucked up. And a part of it is like, I have an internal struggle that is shown in the opposition of ruler of my fourth and seventh house in the second, opposing Pluto in my ninth house of studies, travel, international relations, beliefs, and so on. Okay, so kind of like, hey, think about it. What are the places that would give you food? Well, the church, the Jesuits, the this, the that. Well, they do satanic ritual abuse. Yes, I don't want to compromise on my religion for having a meal, or don't want to compromise my beliefs for having a meal. Now try to go and work in there. Let's try to work with that. Okay, it's very, very challenging. And if we are at it, let's talk about the Saturn squares. The Saturn squares are changing from the moons that are in Gemini and Sag. Okay, so first of all, Gemini moons, especially middle phase Gemini moons that have been bombarded. Okay, for quite a while now. You are going to be having some sort of relief when Saturn crosses into Aries, because Saturn is going to go from the square to the opposition. Okay, now I think Saturn squares would be when Saturn was in Libra, and I think that was the 2008 issue, where I didn't want to have debt to cover for my studies, and I got into debt because of it. Or I didn't want to fool people around debt. It's basically when I work in a credit card company. I didn't want to fool people around debt. And then I had to ask a loan myself that would not be returned. And I was surprised that I'm given loans. And then the way in which I was trying to balance things, there was a karma to the fact that my karma was that through debt I got my studies, and those people that didn't support me when I basically said no to fooling people about the rate of interest that they pay before the 2008 crisis. And my karma was 2008 crisis, that I'm going to be on welfare and having been paid by the very public that didn't support me when I whistleblowed. This is my welfare. This is why, other than the dividends that I was supposed to get from my patent, which was there's a script when you talk with people. So I identified an option that was very good for the client and was selling a lot. It was basically making the new product that the company came up with, making it survive the market. And so part of that would be the bank basically having to give up the loan, okay, having to give up the payments, because they were discredited after studies. And the other part of that karma was the additional income is all summoning up to the welfare. It's basically the working people paying for to hold me as a whistleblower survived, and rather than like the money that that I wanted not to come out of the pocket of the people actually is coming out of the pocket of the people, because otherwise I wouldn't survive as whistleblower. And that's what comprises me receiving welfare. Okay, this money came from somewhere, and I worked for this money. But the system has to change for me to be able to go to work. Otherwise, we run into the same challenge, and I'm 40, mind you. Okay, so think about the square where there is tension. Okay, the person that lived on cash and only had a bank account because they were forced to have bank account from the company. Okay, because one of my parents' accountant, mind you, not accountant like, they were managing for the traumas that they've been through, so they couldn't work. So it's like, why? Okay, they could manage that income, and my role is like, I nobody criticized me for when I used the credit card, but when it comes to the balance sheet and somebody to look at it, I have somebody to look at it, which anyway I'm going to need. I'm going to have a business, so that was my view. A bit naive. Okay, you want to separate family from that. I know not all people do it. And Lada's husband is doing accountants and so on, but it's something that, I would recommend a little bit of separation there. It's healthy for the business, and it's healthy for your relations, but I can recommend, and I never tried it. I never got opportunity to apply this, to walk my talk in that sense. So that is the square. Okay, the square is like, there is your voice, and then there is a squaring voice to your voice, and these combine together. Okay, very likely if a whistleblower is trying to make you for not to pay the extra interest, okay, if that whistleblower doesn't actually have a place to work without fooling you or compromising their well-being and creative endeavors, essentially you will pay that money that the whistleblower is trying to save you to that whistleblower in a roundabout way. Okay, and for me, essentially, I had to live on that money that I wanted you to save, because society was not ready for what I had to say, and I was not getting into the core of the issue of why is it even happening. It was like, that seems very stupid. I had no idea for satanic ritual abuse, for attempts to enslave humanity, for all these things. Okay. So now the square moons are going to be Cancer and Capricorn. Okay. Cancer moon is balanced by a good meal. Need I say that? Like, need I say? How do you balance a Cancer moon? A hug, a conversation, a good meal. They know that they need that to think clearly, and when they do, they have ability to think clearly, to make choices in their life. This is their access to choice, basically. Now imagine a Cancer moon that didn't know it. And I have Cancer moon. When I was volunteering on kind of like outside organization way to locate people who are suicidal on the net and talk to them. So we were talking with each other. Sometimes we had to support each other on that. And one of the stories that I heard is someone that was talking to someone that was on the roof about to jump, and they told them that they are loved and they are cared for, and that they care that they won't jump, and that they didn't jump. And I was like, how come? What happened? It's very interesting. If you could tell a person that and they don't jump from the hill, but they were thinking to jump. So it's kind of like a missing link. That's the emotional factor in life preserving. Okay, because I was like, well, this, with Uranus in Sag, like, this is about choices. Choice, and it has to be accessible to me. And then was somebody tackling it from like the Cancer position, like your words of love, and that changed the way that changed the choice of a person for to commit suicide or not. That I was dumbfounded, and so Aries, Saturn can create some sort of it can create exactly such crisis. This person standing on the roof, thinking like, I'm going to have my own choice here. Then they talk to someone because they don't even know why to explain, and they can be saved in that way, and that can be an emotional crisis, psychological. It can be a worldview crisis, especially if you like ninth house Cancer or ninth house Aries, because it can be a worldview crisis where the factor of emotions is added to the equation and it changes of what you thought about choice. Jupiter exalts in Cancer. Why Jupiter exalts in Cancer? Because in Cancer you have access to choice. Moon is a manifesting sign. And access to choice can be both by having, well, let's say, the possibility of like assisted suicide, but it could also be what's helping you in having a possibility of assisted suicide. Well, it's actually the care that somebody cares to make choice accessible to you. That's an emotional factor. You feel cared for by having this access to choice that you choose essentially to live on, where you know that you're safe if you choose otherwise, so you're accepted if you choose otherwise. Get it, holding space for that choice. That, by the way, cures suicide. Um, of course, you have to have housing, moon, food that's actually nourishing you, and emotional support. So, yes. But then you can go on thinking that suicide is a neurological disease and there are pills. And then maybe, the act of accepting for whichever, whether it's pills or something like that, is the act of accepting that you're not to blame can give you a bit of curation. But essentially, it's not that your mind is dysfunctional, it's that you need access to choice. And caring in the form that maintains your sovereignty. Okay, so think about this as the challenge between the very sovereign Aries and the caregiving Cancer, where Saturn is creating limitation around this in some sort of a way. Okay, Saturn can be limited of your sovereignty, where you can feel suicidal, but you could actually feel like, oh, there's actually something that's caring for me there, or you may interpret that there's just something weird that's going on here that creates for friction. If both of you have a point, and then there is a growth that happen out of this, okay, out of this crisis, okay. Um, But at any rate, it can be the limitation of depth, the limitation of some sort of worry, the limitation of lack of sovereignty that has to do, that limits your emotional safety. Okay, I want to pay attention to that. Moon Capricorn. Now, Moon Capricorn are already used to having their emotional needs fulfillment delayed. So, um, that can create a situation where Saturn comes and challenges your emotional perspective with sovereignty in some way, or um, you might feel a burden on the world, and perhaps Saturn comes and criticizes you. Why did you not ask for help? Okay, because this is, why did you not get help? Because ask for help is more a Cancer thing. Why did you not go and get help? That's more Aries thing. And it's like, why did you not go and get help? Now, this can be particularly draining if you've had a situation like me, where you went and got help, and that was the help that put you in the situation. So that can be a constricting, emotionally constricting factor, where they go and get help when you feel a burden on the world is not accessible to you, because you don't think that you'd open up, and then you open up to go and get help, and you run into Saturn. Okay, think about people that want to go and get help and heard about the window shelters in Netherlands, and they say yes because I went and got help. Yes, but you were in Germany. You should have gone to Netherlands. And then if they go to Netherlands, and then they deport everybody, they change the structure, they again like we cannot anymore. We've been too benevolent with everybody. And for you, the moon Capricorn is like, but this is when I go and get help. Everybody told me to go and get help. So that can be particularly emotionally dumbfounding. And particularly challenging because this is exactly meeting you at the place where you decide to take action. And then that, and everybody perhaps everybody before told you, you know, you're not a burden. When you are asked, people are happy to help you. People are this, and then you meet the people that said, we've helped so many people. We're so drained. We had enough of that. Sorry, we can't, with the cold face. And you're like, the fuck is going on? So unfortunately, my prediction is that is going to further challenge the moon, okay? This is another moon that I'm more worried from during the Saturn Aries. And we want to be up there for the moon, Capricorn. Another thing that you might be able to do, as I've offered in another place, is to get a fluffier moon talisman. For example, get yourself a moon in Taurus talisman. Not a moon in Cancer, because a cardinal moon, and that's kind of like, oh, let's treat your opposing to your moon. Get yourself a moon in Cancer. Get yourself a moon in Taurus, if possible. Okay, if Taurus is better aspected in your chart, then that would be assisting. Okay, in general, get yourself a fluffy moon talisman. Okay, whether it's a moon in Taurus, or whether it's some nice aspects between the moon and Venus. Though the moon is not supposed to be applying. No, yes, a nice aspect between moon and Venus. Something that makes it more fluffy. Okay, now you might want to deal with that through the benefic of sect. Okay, if Jupiter is your benefic of sect, get you to a Jupiter talisman. Can be optimistic and have opportunities, albeit so and so, or Venus. Okay, for you can feel that you are worthy and you are this and you are that. Moon talisman, if your moon is hardly aspected or in a bad place, might not be facilitated, but on the other hand, you have to try and see, okay, maybe that moon talisman helps you to receive more. On the other hand, if the moon is already challenging, you might not want to hit it directly, so you might want to find which is the benefic of Saturn, which is Venus or Jupiter, and if one of them is better aspected, go through there. That can be okay. Or alternatively, work with Deneb Algedis, the closest fixed star that's more benevolent and of Saturn nature. Work with Procyon, okay, that's not working with the moon, but working with something you can sweeten the challenges you're dealing with. Andromeda constellation, which is in Aries, and can be reconciliation. That can be very beautiful for you, especially if you work with a crystal or a rock that has this talisman form of a rock, can be very benefic. Crystal in general, for Saturn, crystals are good. You just want to make sure you give blessings and open to making changes in the reality of the miners of these crystals, okay, which is child labor and so on, because Saturn is karma. And so if you've been benefited by crystal as a part of your karma, to tend to the means of production, okay, and those children. I've been very benefited by crystals. I bought a ton of crystals when I was in academia because I was hungry and I felt like there's no way I'll have money to buy food, so at least let's work with crystals. And that's how I learned crystals, to work with crystals. And now I'm tending to expandable children, which is under governing all our leaders and performers, basically any job that you would do, but it's also the children that mind those crystals. Okay, so it's a certain karmic thing is that helped me, and now that is something I need to tend to. And to holding the crystals, the blessing of the crystals, you can use that. So when you work with crystals and sadhusati, give blessings to the people that created that, and the changes in their world are very likely going to affect you as well, positively. So that is, and astrology works. You think about astrology of Saturn is karma. Again, a lot of people have the various ways of like resistance, because a lot of times this is used as to punish people. I don't believe in punishing people. I don't believe it's punishment. I don't believe Saturn is punishing in general. um, I do believe that there are structures that is to nature, and when you have and points of interference in that structure and adaptation. Saturn is the architect, so we need to architect a different structure. So if you think about charity, it just means that those that suffer right now, you basically give them more access to choice, or you give them, or you change for the structure, because you're an agent within that makes a decision. Now you've changed your psychological situation, perhaps have given hope to people that gave up on, so they're less recruitable to terror, to this, to that, and created encounters that of karmic event, or you're changing events, and this is a structural thing that you can tend to, and that structure is working with intention, with things that are also kind of invisible. And so there is structure, there is karma, and this is why we have, for the question of like, well, if there is karma, why are children get born into this situation, and so on and so forth. Well, we're talking about structure, and we have points of interference in the structure. We can create gods, and with the gods that we create, they change for the structure of our society, because it's not just a consciousness, it's also a banking system that worships this god versus that god, or worships the god in one way rather than another way, because Saturn can be dedication, rest, helping those who are in need, and so on, or building safety houses, or growing agriculture, rather than in slavery, being in slavery, or enslaving, or evacuating people out of homes so they're homeless, and so on and so forth. And so one is satanic, and for the other is actually life-giving, and making and giving longevity. And then you have to understand that these satanic cultures, they invert for whatever part of the structure is, for to create control, which is essentially stupid, but that stupid kept them going for quite a while. So they have reasons to believe that it's that that's what you need to do. Albeit the prices, and you don't have to agree. And there are points of interferences where you want to shape or architect your own world. So the hard aspects of Saturn, which people call karmic tests, this is where we are meant to create something structural in our lives, and just like engineering, okay, it's from conception to actual birthed structure. There's a lot of refinement to do, and the hard aspects is where that refinement is the final test of something, okay? It's the final test of something. For example, if I think about 2008, before I said no more work is not yielding for me, something has to change in another way in life. I have tried every juncture that I could for to make sustainable income. Then that needed to be that final test. Okay, I did try every job in the market. I did get into higher position. I did do even facial and change of my appearance, not like shape shifting, but to take care of my appearance and my clothing, be more representative, open doors. Okay, everything that I could do to open doors to make a good, sustainable, fair income for myself was except for like going to a university that was not accessible to me, and in that I got in debt, which essentially provided for my studies. um, so that thing that changes everything in the sense of what I'm doing today was things I would be exposed to during my studies in one of the leading universities in the world. Okay, Ben Gurion University was, bless you, one of the leading universities. It was a local university. It was not Ivy League university. So if the creme de la creme is so, then I have grounds to know what I speak. Is they were trying to traffic me to the Ivy League, okay? And I say traffic because that's what it means. It has nothing to do with intelligence, competence, none of that. I got fair, good grade, but absolutely not high grade in those exams that you needed to do. And then when I needed, emotional help, that was picked in by the head of the department there, and she says, "You're very intelligent. You're very this. You're very that." What are you talking about? I have for this grade. It's not a low grade. It's not a high grade. It's a good grade. She said, "No, but for your department, for your this, for your that. What's this dumb fuckery?" Okay, I didn't say that to her because I was like, okay, maybe she's going to give me, better treatment or something. But that was definitely an attempt of recruitment to certain things that today I do the opposite of. Okay, especially when you talk about, models in psychology, in psychiatry, pharmaceuticals, politics, and whatnot. So for as long as I had the privilege, and in that sense, you could say I eventually had smart. Okay, I'm not a stupid person, but it's also not like my grades were showing off my intelligence. Definitely not in that sense. Because, so So what I got to say about the Saturn transit, it's a karmic test. Okay, it's that final thing. You try your options, that final things before there's a certain breakthrough. And the breakthrough with the hard aspect is crisis. Okay, with the easy aspects, the sextiles, the trines, it's a refining moment where what you've been building accumulates to something that you can enjoy, okay? Whether it's wealth or whatnot, or emotional resilience. It's like, hey, I have this and that and that and that and that, okay? So the hard aspect is what you have really tried every which way and you genuinely believed. You genuinely believed in those attempts. Okay, you were genuine about trying every which way so as to keep you going, and now something structurally has to change. You've accumulated of all you could do without that thing that Saturn comes to change in your life, and now Saturn changes that. But it is crisis. It's not something that you're ready for. It's something that you've genuinely been trying to avoid, or something that you've genuinely been trying to challenge yourself. And you've done the inner growth. Now something is changing externally, or you've done the real world steps. Now something is changing internally. Okay, if you think about myself in 2008, I tried the real world steps of leaving to a better paying job, becoming a more representative, going to conferences myself, okay, for doing the things that would give me job satisfaction. And then with the internal, eventually it led to doing a degree, but then the internal thing also changes. It was like, no, I'm not blaming myself. I genuinely tried everything I could possibly do with the working market and my skills. I'm pretty talented, and I'm not having physical things that could create stigma around my visibility. So I'm not marginalized in that sense. So if I didn't reach anywhere, then there's something here that the work doesn't work. Something else has to change. And I just went for a retreat, which for studies was a retreat for me. Okay, I was not doing that to get what I was marketing that in the sense that maybe something will change, maybe that's the thing that changes everything in terms of income, which is not true and I don't believe in. It's not true to the business world. It's just the fact that the business has to be in debt because it has to money launder directly or indirectly. Unless we change it, okay? If we would have 10 expendable children, because just screaming pedos is not going to solve the problem. So those are the Saturn things. Something substantial is created, but before that is created, you genuinely work on all the rest of the facets. And here is this emotional satisfaction. Okay, before I decided that psychodynamic psychotherapy within the pyramidal structure cannot work because it's a Russian roulette, I went to psychodynamic psychotherapist. Okay, I went and challenged my notion. I went and read the books. I went and did the work. I went and talked about with my relational therapist. I had the top fine, I had a cutting edge information of the field, whatever practice in the field, and with the personnel in the field that could get me to curate my relational traumas before I declared, well, my psychologist is MK Ultra and is blockade as a blockade in healing that is by design. That was okay for the Saturn transit. That was, and now what is Saturn trining my moon? But now I can say to you, and I can explain to you, and I'm not emotionally overwhelmed when I say that, and the name of the person is out, but also the structure is out, because all these things, the grace giving is done by this Saturn trining my moon, okay, leaving the trine to my moon in Cancer. And you see how harmonious that is, even though we are talking about global government control. How resilient, how harmonious that acts in me, because I genuinely tried all the healing methods, and I genuinely tried giving all the credit, and I genuinely tried exposing for what needed to be exposed, including for the name of the psychologist that did that. And I genuinely give the grace that this is the structure, and because this is the structure, I don't place too much emphasis on the agent, but I also don't neglect it within the structure. Okay, that's the trine. That's not what you're dealing with. Don't expect to be me right now. And I cannot expect you to be me right now, because now you're going through the struggle. But I want you to know, when you come out of this struggle, then, and you will come out of this struggle, there's a sense of harmony and peace. Okay, yesterday there was a show from Iran. All the missiles, Not only that, I came every week or so, I go to the airport and I stay one night at the airport, and it's the ninth house for me, and I have Saturn in the ninth, and that's not, you can't say it's honoring Saturn, it's not intended, but it's definitely like a pilgrimage, and I have my own deeper, psychological growth that happens around that. But I don't sleep one whole night, and then I expect when I go back, whether to my parents and to my own home, it's like a prescription, okay? And I expect to rest. And then on that day, there was the invasion to Lebanon, and then the missiles from Iran, and it was pretty fucking scary. Okay, that they're very loud, they're very big, and you think that it's at first I thought they are falling, and you're like, well, you could die. Okay, it's a show, but sometimes they have to kill people in the show. And I was thinking about for leaders, and I was thinking about for the expandable children practices, and I was thinking about for the emotional resilience of these leaders and what they went through, and the topic of expandable children I'm tending to, and I was calm. And so Then I went to sleep. I slept very well and very tight, except for my parent that always thinks that I'm. You know, these people that get into your room, they're so vibrant and live, you don't want to kill them. Like, you really need to sleep. It's like sleep deprivation is torture. Stop doing that. Okay? Go and handle with the Virgo stellium. They don't have rest, so they can't give it to others. So so that thing is more of like the trine is the emotional, the fruits of your labor is that, like, oh, the world is in war and I'm joking about it. Okay, not because it's not scary, not because bad things couldn't happen, but there's a sense of Zen-like consciousness where you're like, you've battled the battles, okay? And the internal peace and comity that's created, you're going to feel it through the trine in sextile, and then of course it's going to be a square again, or your conjunction or opposition. It's just how life is dynamic in that way. And sometimes for that, it's not internal resilience, but it's like, hey, you have a house, you have food, you have this, or you have emotional support to experience it differently. The satie might be in situation where I have none of that. So that's why it's so challenging. I hope this video meets you well. Okay, if I was, when Saturn ingressed into Pisces, I was worried about like the moon Pisces saties, and now the Saturn's into Aries. Okay, well, the Aries moons are going through that. So I'm just like preparing myself basically for who are the next ones that are going to be in emotional crisis. Yes, so that's something, okay, to take into consideration. If you are a friend or family or company of someone who's going through the sadicity, it's important to remember that you won't remember. It's important to remember that that constriction that they have around them may limit your ability to be next to them. I keep saying, God forbid is death, okay? I keep saying, there's no such thing as suicide. It is both true, and it is true, but also there is a certain limitation right now of your ability to see what you need to do, and you might do the wrong things. So it's true that if you are listening to psychiatrists to tell you, oh, this person must be taking those pills, you are literally murdering them. Okay, so if you listen to that, learn about open dialogue, housing first. It is also true that when you try to tend to that, you might not be able to get this person the housing before they die, but at least tend to that. It's what you can do. If you are experiencing the fatigue yourself, then be graceful with that fatigue and understand that the sadicity affects you, even if you're not going through that, and it's limiting your ability to be there for them. And that can be the way it operates in your life. So it's the gift of grace, as well as being aware of what are the things that you could be doing that are literally killing them, and how some of them you can tend to. Okay, if you can decide not to listen to psychiatrists to tell you, oh, if they don't take this pill, they kill themselves, well, that pill is going to make them kill themselves. You can tend to modalities around healing that are actually useful. You can tend to the fact that Vassar van der Kolk that encouraged people to rape is not so on the money as open dialogue and housing first, and certain type of somatic therapies. You can tend to the fact that some somatic therapies can perpetuate sexual abuse. You can tend to all of these things, and in that sense can remediate for that as the other party, that you don't participate in the killing and the murdering of, okay, especially when Saturn is going to arrive at 22 degrees, those moon 22 Pisces. Okay. So gift of grace is important, that you are doing what you can, and it can limit, create a boundary limitation of you being able to help that person. um, and this is a part of life. It's not for anyone to blame. That being said, if you listen to this video, you already know for some of the things that you might be doing that can seal the deal on their tombstone, that you might not be, you might not be forced to do if you had this information that I'm giving you right now. So that in itself can be remediation. Sometimes you say, I'm not going to force a person to do anything, and they die, and you ask yourself, oh, what if I intervened? What if I this? What if I that? I don't have a clear-cut answer to you, but I can tell you that the torment of person that is abandoned by care, and not even have access to death, is not something that I wish upon anyone. So yes, with that I'll end. Thank you for watching.